Alright, so we're back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and also we're discussing The Last of Us, which is a series I love to talk about whenever I can. But as it turns out, with the recent PS5 remake of the original Last of Us, The Last of Us Part 1, they actually put in what appears to be a Final Fantasy VII Easter egg. Maybe specifically a Final Fantasy VII Remake Easter egg. I like doing videos on these whenever like a more modern game comes out and puts in an FF7 Easter egg, just because, of course, FF7 is my favorite game and what we talk about here on the channel. A recent example is Elden Ring. There's a boss in that game that looks like Kate Sith. There's also a specific church in there. I think there's a couple different churches in Elden Ring. But there's one that the name of the church is very similar to the Aerith, and there's also a patch of yellow flowers in the church where they would be in the Sector 5 Slums church. Now, initially with this Easter egg that we're going to look at, I wasn't sure if it was new or old, just because I'm not sure what the Easter eggs are in the original Last of Us, and I don't remember all the different assets and shit around the world. And obviously, thinking about it, it makes sense that it is a newer one, just because they redid, I think, just about every asset, if not all of them, when it comes to the PS5 version of The Last of Us. So I did, in fact, load up The Last of Us Remastered, the PS4 version, and went to the same location where we're going to look at this Easter egg, and it is entirely different. And this FF7 Easter egg is not there. But before we continue, I do want to shout out this Twitter account, Hugo_artist, because as far as I'm aware, they're the one that found it, because I've looked online, again, because I wanted to look up and see if this was a new or old Easter egg, and there's nothing about this anywhere. And the game's been out for 2.5 weeks now, so it seems like nobody else has really discovered this yet. And it was also like weirdly perfect timing when I came across their tweet, just because I had just finished playing The Last of Us Part 1. I just earned the platinum, tweeted out about it, and like turned off the PS5 and was just chilling for a bit. And I came across their tweet not long after that. Also, shout out to them for replying to my tweet as well, because I asked them where you could find this at, because I just finished playing through like my second full playthrough of the game. So I was kind of curious where this was, because I hadn't seen it yet. So you'll find this Easter egg in the University section of The Last of Us. It'll be in the first half of the University section. It'll be at the second gate, second generator area where Joel has to cut through the dorms to try to get to the generator. And it will be literally the first dorm you come across once you go upstairs. It'll be the first dorm on your left. Once you walk into the room, you go forward a little bit, and then on the left wall is a poster that says Stargazer and has what appears to be Tifa and Cloud on it. So with this poster, we're seeing two characters from behind. The male character has their hair spiked off to their right, which is, of course, how Cloud's hair spiked in FF7 Original and also Remake. Now, the female character's hair is really kind of just long hair, right? It's kind of generic looking, but it does look almost like it could be pulled into a ponytail towards the end of it, which is, of course, how Tifa's hair is. Now, for the rest of the video, we are going to refer to them as Cloud and Tifa. It's not an exact one-to-one of these characters. For starters, you're seeing Cloud in a regular t-shirt, which he doesn't really wear pretty much ever outside of whenever he's a kid, and even then he's wearing like a long sleeve shirt underneath the t-shirt. Also, whenever they were kids, whenever he would have been wearing this kind of t-shirt, him and Tifa weren't close, so she never would have had her head on his shoulder. Now, that doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one exact replica of Cloud to be a reference to FF7, but we'll get back to this part of the poster in a minute. We'll get back to the head on the shoulder thing, because if you know FF7, you know what that could be referencing. On to the word Stargazer. Now, this is where I wasn't sure necessarily if this poster was trying to reference FF7 Remake or FF7 Original. The word Stargazer could be a couple different things. When it pertains to FF7 Remake, the first thing that comes to mind is Stargazer Heights, which is the apartment complex that Cloud and Tifa stay in the Sector 7 slums.
And here we are, good old Stargazer Heights. You're on the second floor.
But here's why I wasn't entirely sure if this was trying to reference FF7 Remake, because for those of you that haven't played The Last of Us, the world ended in canon in the game September 26, 2013. That was Outbreak Day, right? So everything that you find in the world is kind of frozen in 2013. That's why you only see like PS3s in the world, for example. Naughty Dog puts like extensive attention to detail into Last of Us 1 and 2 for this type of shit, for keeping the world in 2013, right? Another example I can give you guys to show Naughty Dog's attention to detail is that at the beginning of The Last of Us Part 2, Joel plays a song for Ellie called Future Days. Now, this song didn't actually release until the album Lightning Bolts came out about 2 weeks or so after what would have been Outbreak Day. But if you actually go look on YouTube, you can find Pearl Jam playing the song months before what would have been Outbreak Day, as far back as like July 2013. So because the song actually existed before Outbreak Day, they can get away with using it in their game. And the point of bringing all this up is that it kind of wouldn't make sense for Naughty Dog to be referencing FF7 Remake, because that came out in 2020. And it wasn't even revealed until 2015, which is a couple years after Outbreak Day. But in saying all this, I also want to throw in that it probably doesn't actually fucking matter, because when it comes to Last of Us Part 1, you can actually unlock character skins for Ellie where she's wearing t-shirts from a plethora of different games that either came out after Outbreak Day or aren't even out yet. For example, she has a God of War Ragnarok shirt. That game's not even released yet. There's also a Ghost of Tsushima shirt, which obviously that came out years after Outbreak Day. Now, character skins are a bit different than like assets in the world, but the point is when it comes to Last of Us Part 1, they're not necessarily sticking strictly to the 2013 setting, right? So it's possible they could put Easter eggs around the world that reference shit that happened after Outbreak Day. Now, the word Stargazer could also be in reference to the promise scene from FF7 Remake that I kind of showed a clip from earlier where Cloud and Tifa are younger and they're talking on the well in Nibelheim. Now, the scene is happening at night whenever the stars are out, of course. Tifa and Cloud aren't really looking at each other. They're kind of talking with their backs to each other, essentially. And occasionally they look up at the sky at the stars, so you could maybe make it work that way. But again, the scene itself doesn't have like Tifa leaning on Cloud's shoulder, so it might not be a reference to that. Which is why this poster is more than likely a reference to an infamous scene from FF7 original, which is the Under the Highwind scene, which is where Cloud and Tifa, for lack of a better term, do some fucking. Now, when it comes to Cloud and Tifa smashing it out under the Highwind, that's not a guaranteed scene when it comes to FF7. Now, the Under the Highwind scene happens regardless in FF7, but in order for them to engage in coitus, I think you have to have high affection for Tifa. I don't know if you have to actually go on the date with her, but I think you just have to have like high affection with her. I'm sure somebody in the comments will know the specifics of that, but the point is this scene happens throughout the night, right? It starts when the sun's going down and ends in the dawn when the sun's coming up. So they spend the entire night out there underneath the stars, gazing up at the stars. I'm sure Cloud was looking at more than stars that night. But as you can see here with this scene, Tifa is resting her head on Cloud's shoulder. Specifically, she's resting her head on Cloud's right shoulder, which is exactly what's happening in that poster. So I think this poster is a combination of an Easter egg for FF7 original and also FF7 Remake. For one, the word Stargazer, I don't think we've ever had that word associated with FF7 outside of Remake. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But because of that, I would think that it almost has to be a reference to Remake, even if Remake came out years after Outbreak Day. But also the image itself of Tifa resting her head on Cloud's shoulder, like that is 100% from the Highwind scene. I know Tifa and Cloud like hug in Remake, but I don't think there's any other scene that I can think of from the compilation where they're kind of sitting together and Tifa's resting her head on Cloud's shoulder outside of the Highwind scene. If you can't tell already, I absolutely love this Easter egg. I'm obviously a big Final Fantasy VII fan, but I'm also a massive fan of the Last of Us games. Now, I have a little bit of issues here and there with Part 2 on some aspects, but I still absolutely love playing it. But I love the post-apocalyptic setting in video games, and Last of Us does it kind of to perfection, but also it's a very narrative-driven game. The story is fantastic in a lot of ways, especially the first game. So to see this like crossover of sorts, if you want to call it that, for my favorite game of all time, but also one of my favorite franchises, man, I just couldn't be happier. It's awesome. Also, interestingly enough, this Easter egg might have actually happened because of Motomu Toriyama, co-director of FF7 Remake, giving props to The Last of Us Part 2 and Naughty Dog last year for its inclusivity and diversity. Specifically, Toriyama said, The Last of Us Part 2 really delivered on its consideration for diversity, right down to the UI, and I would imagine that the cost of debugging on that game was massive. However, having achieved that makes it a great game that sets a benchmark for the industry. He further goes on to say, I think that expressing diversity with the LGBTQ plus inclusion is an important issue for everyone involved in making content, not just people making games. Final Fantasy VII Remake, we rebuilt the original game using the latest technology, but we felt that it should not stop the technical side. We need to update the story content being shown in line with modern sensibilities. Of course, what he's talking about here is the Honeybee Inn in the remake, because in the original FF7, the Honeybee Inn segment was pretty fucking offensive to that group of people, right? So they had to like change it for modern sensibilities. So maybe the people at Naughty Dog seen that and want to give like some props to like Square Enix and FF7 because of them like shouting them out. I don't know. It's a possibility. To be honest, I hope Square Enix gets wind of this Easter egg and maybe tries to give it back to Naughty Dog with one of their games, potentially FF7 Rebirth. Maybe throw in an Easter egg to one of their franchises. I don't know if you would do The Last of Us or if you would do like Uncharted or something else, but kind of also pay it forward. That'd be kind of cool. But my dudes, that is going to be pretty much the video. I somehow made this thing longer than it needed to be, but I did want to go over it extensively. You can just look at it and know that it's an FF7 reference just by the character models themselves, but I did want to break down all the different ways that it could be an Easter egg for FF7. Either way, my dudes, that is going to be the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe if you guys are new and stay more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications, follow me for #DaveYT. I'm a Discord. Links to social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys. Cloud and Tifa fucked. By the way, my dumbass forgot to put this earlier in the video because I got so into like breaking down the Easter egg, I forgot to like show what it looks like in PS4. But when you go to the exact same area, you can see right here that the wall's entirely different. It's just a bunch of pictures. It's nothing like it is in the PS5 version.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain or leave it like Cobain.